Okay, today's topic is boys to men, and we're going to look at the period of time between 12 and 20, and we're going to be talking about some of those turbulent times. The interesting thing about that particular time period is it forces parents to have to change. And that's kind of good for us too, because it brings about some growth in us. So again, we're going to be talking about boys to men, 12 to 20, the incredible processes that are going on, including mentally, emotionally, and of course, physically. Thank you for joining us.
Dr. Dean Beckloff has been working as a counselor with students, families, kids, and teens for over 40 years. As the founder of the Beckloff Behavioral Health Center, Dr. Dean focuses on children and families that need a little extra help via counseling. Each week with Dr. Elizabeth Zach, we discuss all things family related to help people create the positive family they want to build. Welcome to the Dr. Dean Show.
Okay, today we're joined again by our co-host, Dr. Zach, our clinical director for Beckloff Behavioral Health Center. And our special guest is Dr. Graham Martin, who is our director of testing services at our center as well. He also has a very strong client base where he is working with kids, teenagers, and also then adults as well. So we are especially honored today to have Dr. Martin and to get to hear a little bit about his expertise in all of this as well. We'll be looking at some of the issues that boys to men are faced with as they're growing up in this developmental period of time. It can be turbulent. What was the word that you used, Dr. Zach?
A time of storm and stress.
A time of storm and stress. And as I said, it creates tensions, but it's good because it helps everyone to continue growing and developing, even us as parents. So we're going to be looking at several different issues here that kind of hits some of the things that we're dealing with in today's age. I mean, things are different from when I was a teenager, and probably both of you as well. So, we're looking at some of what we're looking at in today's world. At the same time, though, some of the things are still common, in terms of the growth and the development of our teenagers. So, first of all, we're going to look at gaming and social media, because boys are caught up in that. And in my opinion, it's just, I don't know if there's research in this, and maybe we'll find out from YouTube, but it seems to me in my work with teenagers and boys that they are much more drawn to gaming than girls. Now, my girls had some games. There wasn't much back then. I remember one time they showed me, they were playing this game. You build a family and you build a city and you build, do you remember that? Mm-hmm. What was it called?
Oh,
I don't remember.
The Sims?
That's it.
Yeah.
You win $1 million. Yes, yes.
I'll see you tomorrow.
And an all expense paid trip to Guyana. Okay?
Okay.
Yes. Now, one time they called me over and said, "Dad, look, we can kill this guy." I was like, "What?" They built a swimming pool, got him in, and then pulled the steps out. So he has to drown. I said, "You put those steps back in there. We're not going to be killing people in our house." So,
and how far things have come in games since then. That was tame.
Tame.
That was very tame.
Yeah. I just didn't want to see some poor guy drown.
Right.
Right. But okay, so guys, what are the pros and cons of gaming as well as social media with boys? Dr. Martin, what do you think?
Well, the pros, especially what you hear from a lot of adolescents, if you ask, what's the deal? You're spending like 3 or 4 hours a day gaming, and most often they'll respond with, "Well, I'm hanging out with my friends." Mm-hmm. And that's something that I think it's important to keep in mind, that there is a crucial social element to it.
For sure.
I think more than we realize.
Right.
So that's certainly a pro. Cons,
Right.
I mean, they're spending 3 or 4 hours a day playing video games. So that's a con.
And
And the social interaction isn't face to face, but it's better than nothing.
right. That's the thing that I think worries parents and makes me give some pause for consideration too, because are they really being with people, in a physical way, like engaging? It's through a computer and a screen. What about social media, Dr. Martin? Do boys engage on social media as well?
Oh yeah.
Okay. And is that good, bad, ugly?
I mean, a little bit of both, similar to video games. I think it's not as much of a question of whether it's good or bad. It's just the nature of the engagement.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of just par for the course. It's built in now. Social media, gaming. I would argue that all adolescents participate in gaming, social media,
And
boys and
older.
girls.
Yeah, my 33-year-old daughter said to me kind of mournfully, I'm sad because I use TikTok all the time to get everything and learn
News,
so much.
including.
Yes, and she said, I'm afraid they're going to take it away. I don't have a TikTok account, but I was just surprised that she is using it as a platform for gaining a lot. So we have a really amazing expert today. Dr. Zach is in the throes of raising 2 teenage boys. In fact, she's kind of getting towards the end.
Getting close.
Sort of. As we know, and it seems like it's generally known out there now, that the brain of the teenager is not fully developed until about the age of 25, and some need a little bit longer. So, yes, some definitely need a little bit longer.
Yes.
So, but Dr. Zach has 2 teenage boys. This is the world she rocks in.
This is my wheelhouse.
Yes. So,
Yes.
Dr. Zach, what about those things? What's been your experience with your boys with regard to social media as well as gaming?
Well, I will piggyback on what Dr. Martin said. I do think gaming is quite different than, when I was a kid. We had Pong, right? I mean, I'm really aging myself. And, later, Donkey Kong and things like that. Gaming looks very different. And in a positive sense, there is this social connection that can happen via gaming. They are able to play online with their buddies. And I think for some of our kids who struggle maybe a little bit with social anxiety or who may be a little more shy, it is a way that they can learn boy bantering, and they can, connect in that way. I know for my boys, and you're right, I have an almost 18-year-old and a almost 16-year-old, especially over COVID, it was a lifesaver. I mean, just to have this, this opportunity to connect. The other thing, I think we may think of gaming, especially as parents, with all negatives, but the other thing with the kind of games there are now, they can build worlds. There is an opportunity for creativity and using imagination. There is, there's problem solving that has to happen in these elaborate games that they play now. Flexible thinking, things that maybe we forget that our kids are actually, being able to, to use. And so I think those are some positives. Definitely, there are kids who are addicted. I mean, addicted to their device, addicted to social media, addicted to gaming. And so, there is that, potential for not being as connected with family, for not being outdoors, for not exercising, for not doing some of these other things that we know, are important for our kids. And so, I think it's a matter of making sure that, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Right. Just like life. But having some limits there, knowing that there are some positives that can come from gaming and from engaging in social media, because it's not going anywhere.
Right. It certainly doesn't seem to be.
Yeah.
Now, maybe the government will ban TikTok.
Right.
We
That
don't
might
know.
happen.
But that may happen.
Right.
I think a lot of parents are very concerned about gaming and the amount of time that is spent on social media and gaming and all of that. And so I think those are some of the dangers that parents are thinking about, especially pretty violent games,
Yeah.
that are extremely violent.
And we can see more aggression. I mean, that is something that, especially with our boys that get involved in these violent kinds of content. And, the other thing that, I have learned with my boys, the types of games that they play now, there's not a natural end. You're playing Donkey Kong and your three little characters die and the game's over. These kinds of games, I mean, my gosh, they add power or they get this. And I mean, they can go on and on and on. And, kids can get hyper focused and spend hours and, one more game. Well, that can last, a long time.
Right, right. So I'd like to ask both of you, do you have any strategies for dealing with this within the family? I remember when we talked about social media and its negative effects on our kids, that one of the things that came up was the parent. How much is the parent staring into their phone? It's happening not only to teens, but to us adults. I know that's true for me.
Right.
My daughter will get on to me about, Dad, we're at a restaurant, please put your phone down. Like, I didn't know I had it up. No, I'm sorry. So parents, how much time are we spending on it? And are we really thinking through about how are we going to help our family develop? Like, maybe we need to get out. Maybe we need to go throw the ball at the park. And we've got to put our phones down and we've got to take action and get out there and do something. So what are you thinking? What are your thoughts, Dr. Martin, about maybe intentionality of parents as well as what are some strategies in working with this?
Yeah, I think it's important to try to hone in and observe how the game's making the child feel or the adolescent feel. Is it a constant beatdown? Are they stressed? Do they feel pressured or obligated to spend extra money to buy this extra thing that's going to help them finally win? Are the people that they're communicating with communicating in a collaborative way that's friendly and supportive, or are all the people that they're playing with, just beating them down,
Trashing them.
Yeah.
Yep.
And are they good at the game? People don't like to do things they're not good at usually, and a lot of the kids who you hear playing an excessive amount of video games, from our perspective, for them, they're doing what they're really good at, and it's their time to shine. This might be a kid who struggles in school, isn't naturally gifted in sports, and then they find this game, and like they're doing great, they're winning. It feels good. So if it feels good and you observe that it's helping and it's having a net benefit, then that's certainly something to consider. And noticing the impact it's having on the adolescent can only occur through being around it, like watching them, playing with them, not just storming into the room and saying, you've been on there for 4 hours, like go out there and ride your bike, like sit down, watch them play. If they're playing well, say, wow, you're winning. How'd you do that? There's 100 people playing and like there's only 15 left and you're one of them. Nice job. And I think that's a key starting point to deciding what to do next.
Exactly. I think that parents can feel this way, that their adolescent doesn't want to hear anything positive from them. Like, if I say something nice, they're just going to reject it. Well, they may. They may reject it. They may say, okay, I know this is dating myself, but speak to the hand. They may act like they reject it, but those words are important. You know, that the affirmation from a mom and a dad are important, although we can feel like they're just going to reject it anyway, so why do I put that out there? No, give it anyway. Whether they seem to accept it or reject it, they need that. They need it.
Yeah. And, you know, if you understand the game and have observed some of what's happening, I think you can give more strategic and thoughtful affirmations.
Yeah.
Like, you don't say, well, that was a good try. And they're like, no, it wasn't. Like, that was terrible. Haven't you been watching? So if that's the case, you could say, ooh, this game looks hard, you know? And I think that's more consistent with what they're feeling. And they're going to be less likely to say, you know, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think I love what you're saying. You know, part of what we really want to do, I mean, with young ones, but certainly our teens, is to foster that connection.
Yeah.
Especially with our teens. And so I think that's the foundation for so much of our parenting, is if you have a strong foundation there of connection. And exactly what you're saying. I mean, so many of us, you know, the game, the device, you know, maybe upstairs or somewhere else, and so we're hollering up that it's time to go. But I think that's a great strategy, is to sit with your kid. One, you can learn the content of their game, right? And kind of, you know, maybe have a conversation about, you know, some of that.
Put the ladder back in the swimming pool.
Put the ladder
We're not
back
going
in
to
the
kill
swimming
anybody.
pool. Yes. My boys, not so much anymore, but, you know, when they probably middle school age, now they play just with their friends. But when they were connecting online, there was a time when, and this was before they wore headsets. Now they wear headsets, and so you really don't know what's going on if you're not connecting. But there was a time when I think I asked my youngest, there was a voice and I didn't recognize it, and asked, you know, who are you playing with? Oh, it's my friend from Florida. Like, oh. And so we had to have a conversation about, what have you disclosed to your friend from Florida? And so, you know, things that you wouldn't know necessarily unless you're sitting with them.
Right.
I think the other thing that can be helpful when you know, you're trying to, you know, maybe it's time to end the game, sitting with them so that you can kind of learn a natural ending, right? So you can say, you know, how much longer, you know, do you think that you're going to have? And you can, you know, talk about it. And you can see that they're not, you know, joining a new world, and now we're another hour. And so I think that really is helpful to, you know, to sit with your kiddo and learn a little bit about, you know, their process.
Yes.
And you're willing to make some compromises to spend time with them.
Yeah.
And I think that might be experienced as annoying a little bit, but I think it's a net benefit just to convey that, you know, I don't know anything about this. I don't know how it works. It's not my first choice of activities to do together, but this is what you like. So teach me how to play.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think sometimes when I'm working with teenagers and parents are complaining about their gaming, and kids are complaining about their parents complaining, and I'll ask the teen, you know, well, you know, do you know what the rules are? Do you know what the limits are, you know, for gaming? And most of them, you know, I don't think we have rules, or I don't know. And so I think being very clear as parents what the limits are, what the rules are. And, you know, again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. It could be, you know, some families, it may be, you know, no gaming during weeknights. It could be, you know, you can game after homework is done, or, you know, after dinner, you know, we're going to have family dinner and then you can game after that. So I think just being clear so that everybody's on board with what the, you know, what the limits are.
Exactly. Well, okay, we're going to turn to emotional regulation. Regulating emotions. Now, what about boys during this developmental time period? Do they have some difficulties with regulating emotions?
Buckle up. That's all I have to say.
And if there are difficulties, why is that? Dr. Martin, what's your
Well,
thought?
it's adolescence. There's a lot going on. Hormonally, neurologically. This person may have to shave. They may be taller than you. They may be stronger than you, but their brain, doesn't reflect that level of growth yet. At least in every way. In some ways it might, but as far as emotional regulation goes, there's a lot of work to be done, and there's still time, and that's it's crucial to keep that in mind. That this looks like somebody who's almost fully formed, but like you're telling me, there's 10 or 15 more years left for their frontal cortex to fully develop. And that's tough to keep in the front of the mind as a parent.
Exactly. Yeah. I have a theory. I don't know if it's true or not, but I have a theory that because of all that growth that's happening in the prefrontal cortex, that causes stress on the teenager themselves. And that's why we have kids in high school and college who are struggling with depression and anxiety. And, they're trying to manage a lot and learn how to manage a lot. And sometimes it gets beyond them, and it's hard. So I think for parents to really recognize that what you just said, that there's a lot going on beneath the scenes that we have no clue about, and they don't either.
Right.
But it's happening, and so they struggle a lot. And then feel like I'm the only one that feels this depression, or I'm the only one that feels this anxiety. So I think you're totally right about there's a lot going on. And so, there's going to be some emotional impulsivity, impulsively emotional about anger and all of those kinds of things. What's been your experience with your boys?
Storm and stress. Adolescence being a time of storm and stress. I love it because I think it's just, it's so true. This is a time of decreased self-control, right? But increased emotional reactivity, all due to the biological changes that are happening. We know that, with our young ladies, there's more tearfulness, right? There's more, I don't want to say mood swings, but, we have more estrogen happening. With our young men, with the surge of testosterone, we see more irritability, more anger, more sensation seeking. And this is all a biological, changes that are happening.
Yeah.
The physical changes, my gosh, these, as you said, their brain is not developed, but physically they're becoming, adults.
They look like adults.
They look like adults. And
our country says at 18, they are adults.
Right.
Which is, not true, but it is what it is.
And I think especially for our boys, I know, it's so interesting to see the physical changes and what that range of normal is. My oldest, in 5th grade, he started his growth spurt, and he was very early. And of course, he loved that, right?
Yeah.
My youngest is more typical, was more middle school, but my youngest best friend is just now in 9th grade, kind of sprouting up. And so
your youngest one seems ginormous too.
Well, they both are ginormous.
Yeah.
Right. But I think for our boys, that can be so tricky when your peers, may have developed earlier, and you may be on the the slower end to develop, and they all get there.
Right.
But then we have, just the awkwardness. For a while, my youngest was just all legs. Nothing there, just all legs. And they look kind of awkward, and then their voice is changing, and then, facial hair and acne and all the things that can be, I think we think about it for girls and body image, but our boys, have struggles as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I remember that. I remember thinking my one pimple was the entire face that I had.
Sure. Yeah.
And, you just become very self-conscious.
And boys too. Gosh, I've seen this with my own kids and their friends. They all are talking about their 6-pack. Who has a 6-pack? Who doesn't have a 6-pack? And, it's again, just this focus on, their physical prowess.
How they're
and
supposed to look.
How am I supposed to look, and wanting to compare and wanting to fit in. And so I think it can be, again, for our boys, they may hide it a little more, but I think it is, ever present.
Oh, yeah, it is. Anything else you'd like to add to that, Dr. Martin?
I don't think so. I think you spelled it out pretty well.
Yeah.
And they start smelling, and they don't want to shower, and you have to encourage deodorant and showering and hygiene.
Get in the shower.
Get in the shower, smelly boy.
So you mentioned athletics. Are athletics something that is good for boys, and why? What about the pressures that boys face in athletics? Some boys just are not as good athletically. What about those kids? Dr. Martin, what's your thoughts about athleticism?
Yeah.
Is that good for kids to get into athletics, do you think?
Sure. I think it's great to get into athletics. Probably before adolescence, so you can have some experience. These days, it's almost impossible to come into a sport cold if you haven't grown up playing it.
Right.
So, hopefully, if enough exposure has happened during childhood, and different sports have been tried out, if someone is relatively skilled or interested in the sport, then I think athletics are wonderful. Or if they're not even that naturally gifted, if they like it, then it's wonderful. If they're not a naturally gifted athlete, and sports is a beatdown, and they don't like it, then it's not a good thing. So I think it just depends.
Right. I know for me, I grew up in Africa, and never played with a basketball or a football. And I know what you're talking about. When we came back here as teenagers, we're like, no, we don't do any of this.
Yeah.
Never heard of it. So I ended up going into wrestling because I had two brothers, and that's what we did. We wrestled and fought growing up. So I thought, I'll try that.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts about athleticism?
I think any kind of organized activity, sports included, can be positive. I think particularly sports, because of the physical exercise, right? We know that exercise is good for mental health.
Right.
Developing, sportsmanship, learning how to be a team player, all of these things I think can be, very, very positive. Developing, their physical skills and so I do think there's a lot of positives that come with sports and athletics. The flip side of that is, especially with our teens, where it becomes more competitive, there's lots of pressures. Pressures from peers, if perhaps, again, developmentally, they're a little slower to develop physically, and they see their peers, getting more playing time, or, there can be some hits on self-esteem.
Oh, absolutely.
Coaches can put a lot of pressure on these young boys. We're seeing, sadly, even more eating disorders in our young athlete boys. That I don't know that I think it's been there, but we're seeing more and more coaches pressuring to lose weight, to gain weight, to build muscle, to all of these things, and that can really be problematic. And then the parent pressures. Unfortunately, parents can really do a number on their kids who are involved in athletics, and pressuring them to perform, and coaching, right? Being a parent coach. And, I'll never forget a few years ago on one of my boys' teams, they were playing baseball, and the parent, when their son, missed a fly ball or, overthrew first base, when they came to the dugout, the parent had the kid do push-ups.
Yeah. And that's obviously stating that you're not meeting the grade. You don't measure up.
Right.
I've often felt, just in my experience, boys tend to be more aggressive, probably lots of reasons why. But they tend to be more aggressive than girls. And we see this in our playrooms, where the girls will radiate to playing about dress up or the dolls or the kitchen. And they can all do that, but boys tend to be more on the aggressive side, and play therapy can be a wonderful way to help kids and when they're younger to deal with that. However, I've often felt that athletics is something to encourage our kids to move into, boys in particular, because it's another way to deal with that. Now, sadly, even kids with ADHD, they can have interferences taking place that means they might be a little clumsy. Those processes are interfered with. And so here they are, ADHD, and they have this other whammy where they lack some of that. So finding something for your young man to get into. There's a lot of individual sports, and a lot of our ADHD kids will do that, which is great. And they've excelled in that. So finding something would, I think, be important. We're going to need to be closing up here, but I wanted to bring up one thing very quickly. We have a favorite book called Feeding the Mouth That Bites by an author named Dr. Kenneth Wilgus. And the theme of that book is wonderful, I think. And the theme that weaves throughout that book is emancipation. That the cry of the teenager is emancipation. I want to be free.
Freedom.
So can you speak to that a little bit with regard to teenagers and emancipation?
Yeah, they want to be free, or hopefully they do. I think if they don't exhibit that, like they want you to back off, and that they kind of know how things work, and that you might not be as smart as I thought you once were, or you think you are, that's a good sign. It means you're moving towards emancipation and individuation. On the other side of that is you can't just emancipate them and say, all right, see ya, go figure it out. And that's why it's kind of a dance where you let them take strides towards individuation and emancipation, but then kind of like avoiding the major pitfalls and the big ones. I mean, we're not talking, like a fashion emergency, but something serious,
Right.
like a neck tattoo.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Zach, anything that you would add to that?
Well, I love that book, Feeding the Mouth That Bites You. I think it's the perfect title, because we do feel like our teens can bite, and we still have to feed them. And, what I love about it is it really speaks to the changing role of parent to teen. It's very different than how we parent our young children, that we need to change our parenting strategies with the goal of, independence. We want them to fly and be independent. And so, I think there's so many things that we could talk about, but the idea of freedoms with responsibilities, being able to let go of some of the things that maybe aren't critical, so that they have this sense of power and control, and they can make some of these choices, what they want to wear. That isn't something that, at 16, we want them to be able to choose their attire.
Yeah,
right.
Maybe as, I think as they get older, there can be more and more freedoms. But with my kids now, I don't holler at them anymore about how they keep their room. If things aren't coming out into the hallway, then it doesn't smell.
You might be blowing some people's minds right now.
I might be. This could be, but the idea being, you can have your room how you want it, but I'll tell you, if you can't find your homework, right, I'm not going to go in there and dig for it. If you can't find your shirt that you need for, for athletics, that's on you. And you may have to tell the coach that you couldn't find your shirt. Kind of these natural consequences
Right.
That come from their choices. And,
Exactly.
More and more, as they get older and older, I think we can do some of that, so that, another thing that a few years ago I decided I'm no longer going to be your alarm clock. you're old enough to get up on your own. And so, again, if they're tardy, if they sleep through their alarm and they're tardy, that's something that they'll have to deal with. So I think, learning how to kind of modify some of our parenting strategies as our boys are getting older, and girls for that matter, I think is really important.
Absolutely. Well, we are finished with time, and we could talk about this forever. Boys to Men, thank you both for being here and honoring us with the amount of information that you've given us. Thank you, Dr. Martin, for being present here.
Thanks for having me.
You've been very helpful. And so we are probably going to be continuing to talk about this. But again, thanks for coming. If you need more information, you can look us up on our website, www.drbeckloff.com.